Hollywood loves to borrow from the East, the style, the philosophy, the thunderous beauty of kung fu. But behind every flying kick and slow-motion punch lies a darker truth. Many of the warriors who brought martial arts to the silver screen were quietly shut out by the very industry that once praised them. Some were labeled too intense, others too foreign, and a few simply refused to play by Hollywood's rules. Why were these legends exiled from the empire they helped build? And what really happened when East met West behind closed studio doors? From Bruce Lee's defiance to Jet Li's silence, these are the 15 kung fu stars Hollywood banned, blacklisted, or betrayed. Prepare for a story of talent, pride, and rebellion, where every strike came with a price. 15. Bruce Lee. He was not just a martial artist, he was a cultural earthquake that forever changed the way the world saw strength, race, and cinema itself. Bruce Lee represented something Hollywood had never seen before. An Asian man who refused to be the punchline, who didn't bow to stereotypes, and who carried himself with the confidence of a king. When he first came to America, the studios were fascinated by his charisma, but terrified of his power. They wanted him as a sidekick, a servant, a novelty act, but Lee wanted to be a star. He envisioned a world where Asian men could be heroes, lovers, and leaders. Hollywood didn't share that vision. His dream project, The Warrior, was supposed to be a groundbreaking TV show about a Chinese martial artist in the American West. But the network executives dismissed him as too intense and too foreign, then quietly stole his concept. They gave the lead role to David Carradine, a white actor who pretended to be a Shaolin monk. That betrayal marked a turning point. Lee returned to Hong Kong, where he exploded into legend with The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon. Suddenly, he didn't need Hollywood anymore. Hollywood needed him. But by the time they realized it, it was too late. When Enter the Dragon hit theaters, Lee had already died mysteriously, at just 32 years old. His film became a global phenomenon, turning him into a myth. Yet even in death, Hollywood continued to exploit his image without honoring his fight. He was the man who gave martial arts to the world. Yet for decades, the same studios that rejected him profited from his likeness and imitations. Bruce Lee wasn't banned because he failed. He was banned because he succeeded in ways Hollywood wasn't ready to accept. He stood too tall, moved too fast, and demanded too much truth from a system built on illusion. In the end, he became something greater than a movie star. He became the spirit of resistance itself, the symbol of a man who refused to let the West define his worth. 14. Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan should have been Hollywood's golden child, the perfect blend of action, humor, and global appeal. But instead, he became one of the industry's most misunderstood imports. In Asia, he was a king, a box office titan who did his own stunts, broke his bones for real, and turned martial arts into an art of pure creativity. Yet when he tried to conquer Hollywood in the early 1980s, the studios didn't know how to handle him. They wanted another Bruce Lee, stoic, silent, serious. But Jackie wasn't that. He was the opposite, funny, chaotic, and deeply human. Hollywood couldn't fit that energy into its formula. His early American films like The Big Brawl and The Cannonball Run failed to capture his essence. Executives told him to tone down his accent, stop doing his own stunts, and rely on doubles advice that went against everything Jackie stood for. Frustrated, he went back to Hong Kong and built an empire. Films like Police Story, Drunken Master 2, and Project A turned him into a legend, redefining action choreography around the world. By the time Hollywood came knocking again in the 90s, Jackie no longer needed them, they needed him. When Rush Hour exploded, Jackie finally became a household name in the West, but behind the success, he was still treated as an outsider. He was offered roles that played up stereotypes, while major directors ignored his range and depth. He was never invited into the same elite circles as Tom Cruise or Will Smith, even though his films earned more worldwide. And when he began speaking openly about how the U.S. industry used Asian stars as temporary trends, his honesty didn't sit well with executives. Jackie Chan's ban wasn't a single moment. It was a slow rejection by a system that never fully embraced him. His later comments supporting Chinese government policies only deepened the divide, making him persona non grata in Hollywood press circuits. But Jackie didn't flinch. He kept making his kind of movies, his way, without permission from anyone. Today, Jackie Chan stands as one of the last self-made icons of the martial arts world, a man who didn't need Hollywood's validation to become immortal. They tried to mold him, limit him, and silence him. Instead, he proved that you can be banned by Hollywood and still conquer the world. 13. Jet Li. Jet Li was the quiet storm of martial arts cinema, graceful, disciplined, and lethal. Where Bruce Lee was lightning and Jackie Chan was chaos, Jet Li was precision itself. He rose to fame in China with films like Shaolin Temple and Once Upon a Time in China, where his movements felt less like fighting and more like poetry in motion. To his fans, he wasn't just an actor, he was a national treasure. So when Hollywood finally called, it seemed inevitable that he'd become its next great martial arts star. But once again, the dream turned into a lesson in control and resistance. When Jet Li made his American debut as the villain in Lethal Weapon 4, audiences were mesmerized. His speed, intensity, and calm menace stole every scene from Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. Yet instead of launching him into superstardom, Hollywood decided he would make a perfect villain, cold, quiet, and foreign. He was typecast before he even began. The studios saw his face, his accent, his silence, and built a cage around him. His next few films, Romeo Must Die, Kiss of the Dragon, Cradle to the Grave, tried to showcase him as a hero, but they were always wrapped in formulas designed for Western audiences. The fight choreography was slowed down, the philosophy stripped away, the artistry dulled. Jet Li was told to smile more or talk less, whichever fit the scene better. He once admitted in an interview that he felt like a machine built to fight in American movies, not an artist. Behind the scenes, Jet Li clashed with producers over creative control. He wanted to show the moral discipline of martial arts, the philosophy behind the violence, but executives only wanted explosions and body counts. When he refused to take on roles that caricatured Asian men or glorified bloodshed, the offers started to dry up. Rumors spread that he was difficult or uncooperative. In Hollywood, that's another word for finished. Jet Li returned to Asia, where directors still treated him like a master. Hero and Fearless became international hits, showing the balance of strength and peace that Hollywood never understood. Eventually, he faded from the spotlight, battling health issues but never bitterness. Jet Li wasn't banned for scandal or crime, he was banned for having integrity, for refusing to sell out his art, his culture, or himself. Hollywood saw him as a fighter. The world saw him as a philosopher. And in the end, he chose the path that mattered most: freedom. 12. Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen is the embodiment of discipline, elegance, and raw power. A man whose movements are so sharp they seem to slice through time. In Asia, he is revered as one of the most influential martial artists of his generation, the living link between the old kung fu masters and the modern action hero. But when he stepped into Hollywood, the welcome mat was thin, and the respect even thinner. Donnie's journey began in Hong Kong, where he became a legend through films like Iron Monkey, Flashpoint, and the Ip Man saga. His portrayal of the Wing Chun master who trained Bruce Lee turned him into a global icon, not just a fighter, but a philosopher of balance and honor. When Hollywood finally noticed, it was already late. They brought him in for small roles, often as the exotic warrior or the silent assassin. It was the same box they had placed so many others in before him. In Blade 2, he was cast as a vampire hunter, with barely any dialogue, a background fighter when he could have carried the film himself. Years later, when Rogue One, a Star Wars story, offered him a chance to shine, he turned a minor character into the heart of the movie. His blind monk, Chirrut Imwe, became a fan favorite, yet even then, Donnie admitted that much of his dialogue and motivation had to be rewritten by him because the original script reduced his character to a cliché. Off-camera, Donnie has been outspoken about Hollywood's bias toward Asian actors. He criticized directors for not understanding kung fu, saying they cared only about spectacle, not the spirit behind the movement. When he turned down roles that mocked Asian culture or reduced martial artists to caricatures, his phone stopped ringing. Despite being one of the world's most bankable stars in China, Hollywood quietly stopped calling. In recent years, his political comments defending China during global controversies made him even more unwelcome in Western media circles. While he continues to thrive in Asia, the Hollywood spotlight that once beckoned has dimmed entirely. Yet Donnie Yen doesn't see himself as rejected, he sees himself as liberated. "Hollywood never defined me," he once said. "I define myself." And that's why Donnie Yen remains untouchable. The studios that ignored him may have closed their doors, but his legacy keeps growing, built on mastery, integrity, and the kind of authenticity Hollywood could never choreograph. 11. Chow Yun-fat. In the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, Chow Yun-fat was more than an actor, he was an archetype. Suave, deadly, and effortlessly cool, he could turn a gunfight into ballet and a gangster into a tragic hero. With director John Woo, he redefined the heroic bloodshed genre, bringing depth, emotion, and philosophy to action. Films like A Better Tomorrow and The Killer made him an icon across Asia, a symbol of loyalty and sacrifice. When Hollywood came knocking, it seemed like destiny, the East's most magnetic star, meeting the world's biggest stage. But what awaited him wasn't glory. It was humiliation, mistranslation, and quiet exile. When Chow arrived in America in the late 90s, he was greeted as the next great international star. His debut, The Replacement Killers, was supposed to be his grand entrance. But the studio executives didn't understand who he was or what made him powerful. They stripped away the tragedy and grace that defined his Hong Kong roles, turning him into a generic action figure. The film underperformed, and whispers began, maybe he's not leading, man material. Hollywood never gave him the roles he deserved. In The Corruptor and Bulletproof Monk, he played the same vague archetype, the mysterious Asian mentor or morally conflicted killer. He was capable of Shakespearean emotion, but they made him speak in broken English and fortune cookie wisdom. Behind the scenes, Chow kept his frustration private, never complaining publicly. But those who worked with him said he often rewrote his lines to sound more human, less stereotypical. It wasn't a lack of talent that doomed him, it was Hollywood's refusal to let him be himself. The same industry that worshipped Al Pacino for playing anti-heroes refused to see the same artistry in Chow Yun-fat's blood-soaked elegance. By the early 2000s, he'd had enough. He quietly walked away from Hollywood and returned to Asia, where Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon reminded the world what he could do when allowed to breathe. Ironically, the film became a Western favorite, but it wasn't a Hollywood production. It was proof that he didn't need their system to move global audiences. Today, Chow Yun-fat lives simply, often seen taking public buses in Hong Kong, donating most of his fortune to charity. Hollywood tried to brand him as a failure, but history remembers differently. He was never truly banned, just too real, too soulful, and too proud for an industry that didn't understand grace without greed. 10. Tony Jaa. Tony Jaa came from the rice fields of Thailand, a quiet kid who grew up idolizing Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, dreaming of one day bringing his own country's martial arts to the world. He had no money, no famous last name, no Hollywood agent, only talent that defied physics. When Ong Bak, Muay Thai warrior, exploded onto screens in the early 2000s, audiences were stunned. No wires, no CGI, no stunt doubles, every leap, kick, and bone-crushing impact was real. Tony Jaa became an overnight sensation, hailed as the next Jackie Chan and the future of martial arts cinema. Hollywood came calling fast, but it wasn't ready for him. In America, Executives loved his intensity, but didn't understand his culture. They wanted to turn Muay Thai into a gimmick, a spectacle without meaning. When Tony refused to exaggerate or fake his movements, the relationship soured. He was offered sidekick roles, villains, or silent enforcers, never the hero. One producer reportedly told him, "Your English isn't good enough. You'd be better as the bad guy." For a man who had carried entire films without a word, the insult was brutal. After The Protector, Tony began facing pressure from both sides. Thai studios demanding impossible stunts, and American producers trying to Americanize him. The strain led him to temporarily disappear from the film world, retreating to a Buddhist monastery to find peace. When he returned, Hollywood had moved on, chasing trends instead of talent. His later appearances in Western projects like Furious 7 and XXX, Return of Xander Cage, looked like a comeback, but he was barely used, reduced to background choreography, while less skilled actors took center stage. He smiled through it all, but fans could see the truth. Tony Jaa was too pure for Hollywood's machine. Behind his calm demeanor lies quiet rebellion. He continues to work in Asia, producing and starring in films that stay true to Muay Thai's roots: real pain, real sweat, real spirit. While Hollywood replaced authenticity with green screens, Tony stayed loyal to the old code. No wires, no fakery, no compromise. He was not banned because of scandal or failure. He was banned because he refused to fake the fight. And that's the irony. The man who risked his body for art was deemed too real for an industry built on illusion. Today, Tony Jaa remains a legend, untouched by Hollywood's corruption, proof that truth, even in combat, will always outlast the spectacle. 9. Steven Seagal. In the 80s and early 90s, Steven Seagal was a phenomenon, a Hollywood outsider who broke into the system through martial arts mastery and sheer arrogance. Tall, stoic, and deadly with Aikido, he didn't move like other action stars. He glided through fights with a terrifying calm. For a while, that mystery made him magnetic. He wasn't just an actor, he was marketed as a real-life warrior, a man with government connections, mafia rumors, and whispered CIA ties. But the same intensity that made him famous soon made him impossible to work with. On set, stories began to leak Seagal belittling stuntmen, claiming to be unbeatable, even hurting co-stars who challenged his skill. He allegedly said no one could choke him out until a stuntman proved him wrong and left him unconscious on the floor. His ego grew larger than his box office draw. Directors called him controlling, paranoid, and obsessed with rewriting scripts to make himself look invincible. The humble discipline of martial arts was gone, replaced by self-worship. By the mid-90s, the star who once led hits like Under Siege and Hard to Kill had turned toxic. Rumors of sexual misconduct and bullying began to spread, followed by lawsuits and bans from major talk shows. Behind closed doors, studio executives quietly agreed. No more Seagal. He was too unpredictable, too difficult, too controversial. His temper cost him relationships with producers, and his spiritual guru persona, complete with Buddhist robes and delusions of enlightenment, turned him into a punchline. When his career faltered, Seagal turned to low-budget films shot in Eastern Europe and Russia, often released straight to DVD. As his Hollywood relevance faded, his off-screen behavior grew stranger. He cultivated friendships with Vladimir Putin, obtained Russian citizenship, and publicly praised authoritarian leaders, a move that alienated even his few remaining supporters in the U.S. film world. By the time new generations of martial arts stars like Jason Statham and Tony Jaa rose, Seagal had become a relic of ego gone wild. Today, Steven Seagal is unofficially blacklisted from major studios not by an official decree, but by universal exhaustion. No one wants the chaos, the lawsuits, or the mythology that follows him. Once a man who embodied control, he lost control of everything that mattered. In the end, Seagal's exile wasn't about Hollywood politics, it was karma. A warrior who forgot humility was bound to fall by his own hand. 8. Zhang Ziyi. For a brief, shining moment, Zhang Ziyi was the global face of Chinese cinema elegance, danger, and grace wrapped in one presence. She stormed onto the international stage in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where every movement carried poetry and pain. Western critics hailed her as the new queen of Asian cinema, a bridge between the East's mysticism and Hollywood's modern glamour. For a while, it looked like she would become the next great international actress, the woman who could finally bring balance to a one-sided industry. But in Hollywood, admiration can quickly turn into fear. After her success, Zhang starred in Rush Hour 2 and Memoirs of a Geisha, projects that were supposed to cement her as a crossover star. Yet even those triumphs came with traps. In Memoirs, she played a Japanese woman, a choice that sparked outrage across Asia and put her in a cultural crossfire. Western audiences exoticized her, while Eastern critics accused her of betrayal. Instead of being celebrated for her artistry, Zhang became a symbol of misunderstanding of how Hollywood loved the image of the Asian woman, but never the truth behind her. Behind the scenes, Zhang faced constant microaggressions and stereotyping. Casting directors offered her roles that were either submissive or mysterious, never powerful, never modern. She once admitted in an interview that many Hollywood scripts she received were insulting, built around fantasies of what Americans thought Asian women were. When she turned them down, the offers stopped coming. Some producers labeled her difficult. Others simply forgot her number. Then came the whispers about her personal life, luxury deals, and unfounded scandals, spread by tabloids trying to tarnish her image. In Hollywood, where image is everything, whispers can kill a career faster than failure. By the late 2000s, Zhang had all but disappeared from Western screens, quietly returning to China to rebuild her reputation. There, she flourished, taking on complex, acclaimed roles in The Grandmaster and The Cloverfield Paradox, proving she didn't need Hollywood's validation to be world-class. Zhang Ziyi was not banned for crime or controversy, she was banned by invisibility, by a system that celebrates diversity only when it's convenient. Hollywood loved her face but never her voice. In rejecting their limitations, she chose dignity over fame. And while the studios moved on, Zhang became what Hollywood feared most, an independent woman who didn't need them to shine. 7. Michelle Yeoh. Michelle Yeoh's story is one of triumph, exile, and rebirth, the rare case of an actress who conquered Hollywood not once, but twice, after being quietly dismissed the first time. Before the world called her the Queen of Action, she was already royalty in Asian cinema, performing her own stunts in classics like Yes, Madam and Police Story 3. She had grace, precision, and an inner steel that made her both believable and mesmerizing. Yet when she tried to cross into Hollywood, she quickly learned that talent alone wasn't enough, not for someone who looked like her. Her first big American breakthrough, Tomorrow Never Dies, should have launched her into superstardom. She played Wai Lin, a secret agent who matched James Bond blow for blow, never a damsel, never a stereotype. Audiences loved her, but instead of opening doors, the role closed them. Hollywood executives reportedly said she was too strong and too serious to fit the romantic mold they wanted for Asian actresses. After the spotlight faded, she found herself offered the same shallow parts over and over: dragon ladies, ninjas, or silent warriors. She refused them all. Rather than compromise, Yeoh returned to Asia, where directors like Ang Lee and Wong Kar-wai gave her the respect she deserved. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon turned her into a legend, but it was a film that Hollywood only distributed, not created. Even then, Western media often credited the success to everyone but her, calling her the female Bruce Lee, or China's answer to Meryl Streep, as if her value had to be measured through someone else's name. For nearly 2 decades, Yeoh stayed away from Hollywood's games, choosing substance over stardom. When she returned in Crazy Rich Asians, it was on her terms: elegant, commanding, and entirely herself. But her true vindication came with Everything Everywhere All at Once, a chaotic masterpiece that let her be everything she was once told she couldn't be: funny, furious, broken, maternal, and infinite. Her Oscar win was historic, but what most people don't realize is that Michelle Yeoh was once quietly banned from the roles she was born to play. Hollywood didn't fire her, it ignored her. It shut the door and waited for her to fade. Instead, she waited for the world to change. And when it finally did, she walked back through that door not as a guest, but as the one holding the keys. Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was the Western world's muscles from Brussels, a man who kicked his way into fame with perfect splits and impossible charm. Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't born into Hollywood power, he fought his way in, literally. His breakout in Bloodsport made him an international sensation, the clean-cut martial artist who combined ballet-like grace with street fighter brutality. For a moment, it looked like he would be the next Stallone or Schwarzenegger. But beneath the high kicks and slow-motion triumphs, his downfall was already brewing a storm of ego, excess, and rebellion that would eventually get him blacklisted from the very system that created him. In the early 90s, Van Damme was everywhere: kickboxer, double impact, Universal Soldier, each film a hit, each role louder than the last. But fame hit him harder than any opponent. He became notorious for arriving late to set, rewriting scripts, and demanding impossible edits to showcase his physique. Directors called him brilliant and unbearable in the same breath. His on-set arrogance, coupled with rumors of cocaine addiction, began to spread like wildfire. Hollywood, ever obsessed with control, doesn't forgive actors who forget they're replaceable. By the mid-90s, his star had dimmed. When he refused to sign a multi-picture deal that would have kept him under studio control for less pay, executives quietly froze him out. Projects disappeared overnight, and the tabloids painted him as unstable. His personal life didn't help: affairs, divorces, public meltdowns. The man who once embodied precision and power had turned into chaos. Even his physical perfection couldn't save him from Hollywood's brutal memory. When JCVD premiered years later, it shocked critics. Here was Van Damme, stripped of ego, confessing his flaws, weeping on camera, admitting the damage he had caused. It was raw, real, and brilliant, but too late to fix his reputation in mainstream Hollywood. Studios had already replaced him with safer, more obedient stars. Today, Jean-Claude Van Damme remains beloved by fans who remember when martial arts movies meant something real. But in Hollywood's eyes, he's a ghost, a reminder of a time when stars were allowed to burn too bright before being cast aside. He wasn't banned by a scandal, he was banned by a system that demands perfection and punishes humanity. In the end, the fighter who beat everyone else was defeated only by himself and by an industry that doesn't forgive rebellion once the cameras stop rolling. 5. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes was one of the first true American martial arts stars, a man who could act, fight, and command the screen with effortless power. Long before Hollywood embraced superheroes, Snipes was one. His portrayal of the half-vampire warrior in Blade not only redefined the comic book genre, but also laid the groundwork for the Marvel empire that would follow. Yet when the world should have bowed to him, Hollywood turned its back. What happened to Wesley Snipes wasn't just a career fall, it was an execution disguised as justice. At his peak, Snipes was untouchable. He starred in Demolition Man, Passenger 57, and U.S. Marshals, bringing intelligence and athleticism to every role. He was more than a fighter. He was an artist with precision and pride. But behind the scenes, Hollywood insiders whispered that Snipes was too confident, too demanding, too black to be the face of action. When he began producing his own projects to escape studio control, doors that were once wide open began to slam shut. The breaking point came after Blade: Trinity. On set, he clashed with the director, whom he accused of disrespect and racial bias. Crew members described a toxic environment where Snipes was isolated, written out of scenes, and targeted in the press. Soon after, the government charged him with tax evasion, and the headlines were merciless. Hollywood treated it like a moral crusade, turning his case into public entertainment. Few noticed that dozens of other white celebrities owed more and faced less. Snipes went to prison, serving time while studios quietly erased him from their future plans. When he emerged, humbled but unbroken, he tried to rebuild. Roles trickled in small parts, cameos, nostalgic nods, but the system had already moved on. The man who once helped launch the modern superhero genre was now excluded from the one he made possible. It wasn't just punishment, it was rewriting history. In later interviews, Snipes spoke with dignity, saying he had learned peace and forgiveness in confinement. But the truth lingers. His downfall wasn't just about taxes. It was about control, power, and Hollywood's discomfort with a black martial artist who refused to bow. Today, Wesley Snipes stands as both a legend and a warning. Talent can make you a star, but self-respect can get you banned. Hollywood may have forgotten his name, but every time a hero strikes a blade across the screen, his shadow moves with it. 4. Scott Adkins. Scott Adkins is the kind of martial artist Hollywood always claims to want: disciplined, professional, fearless, and built like a weapon. Born in England, trained in taekwondo and kickboxing from childhood, he spent years mastering not just the body, but the craft of film fighting. His precision, timing, and control are legendary among stunt performers. He should have been a household name, the face of the next generation of action cinema. Instead, he became something else entirely. The underground king of martial arts movies, loved by fans, ignored by Hollywood. Adkins broke through in the early 2000s with appearances in The Bourne Ultimatum and X-Men Origins. Wolverine, but his talent was buried under CGI and stunt doubles for bigger stars. It was Undisputed 2, Last Man Standing, that changed everything. As the brutal yet magnetic Boyka, Adkins delivered the kind of raw physical performance that no one else in the industry could match. The fight scenes were balletic, breathtaking, real. Fans around the world called him the heir to Van Damme and the modern successor to Bruce Lee. Hollywood executives, however, barely noticed. The problem wasn't his skill, it was the system. Adkins wasn't a bankable name by studio standards. He didn't fit their formula of celebrity: first, talent, second. He was told to soften his accent, to lose the edge, to play nice. But Scott Adkins refused to fake it. He continued to choreograph his own fights, often risking injury for authenticity, while Hollywood polished lesser fighters with editing and camera tricks. His realism made him dangerous to an industry that worships illusion. Behind closed doors, Adkins has spoken openly about the bias toward big names over real talent. He's admitted to losing roles to actors who couldn't even throw a punch, simply because studios didn't believe audiences cared about martial arts anymore. Ironically, those same studios now rely on stunt teams inspired by his choreography. His influence is everywhere except on the billboards. While Hollywood sidelined him, Adkins found freedom elsewhere. In independent cinema, he became a cult icon, delivering some of the best fight choreography of the century in films like Ninja 2, Accident Man, and Avengement. Each movie carried a raw honesty that the mainstream had long abandoned. Scott Adkins was never officially banned, he was quietly ignored, which is worse. The studios didn't exile him for failure. They exiled him for being too real, too technical, too devoted to the art of fighting instead of the performance of fame. Today, he wears that exile like armor. His name may not light up Hollywood marquees, but among real fighters, he's already immortal. 3. Iko Uwais. Iko Uwais rose from the backstreets of Jakarta to become one of the most electrifying martial artists of the modern age. Before Hollywood even knew his name, he was already a storm in motion, raw, fluid, and terrifyingly real. His breakthrough film, The Raid, wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. Critics compared it to Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon for a new era, praising its bone-breaking realism and blistering energy. Suddenly, every major studio wanted a piece of Iko Uwais, but Hollywood's interest, as always, came with strings and eventually with silence. When Iko arrived in America, the studios praised his intensity but didn't understand the culture or the philosophy behind his craft. Silat, the Indonesian martial art he mastered, isn't about showmanship, it's about precision, rhythm, and survival. Yet producers kept trying to turn it into spectacle, slowing it down, polishing it, and stripping it of its soul. Iko tried to play along at first, appearing in Star Wars, The Force Awakens and Mile 22, but those roles were tiny blink, and you'd miss him. Hollywood loved using his image, not his identity. Behind the scenes, directors struggled to give him real dialogue, often turning him into the mysterious Asian assassin cliché that's haunted martial arts actors for decades. Scripts made him silent, deadly, and one-dimensional. Iko wanted to show emotion, culture, humanity, but the system wasn't built for that. When he pushed for more creative control, word spread that he was hard to market, and in Hollywood, that label is a quiet death sentence. Frustrated, Iko went back to his roots, building his own universe of action films in Indonesia. Headshot, The Night Comes for Us, and The Raid 2. Each one outperformed most Western action films in choreography, emotion, and authenticity. The same critics who ignored him in Hollywood hailed him as the future of the genre. Meanwhile, the studios that once chased him stopped calling. Iko Uwais didn't need to be banned. Hollywood just quietly decided that men like him belong in subtitles, not on posters. He represents a truth the industry can't handle, that real martial arts can't be faked, and real warriors don't fit in the mold of the manufactured hero. Today, Iko continues to redefine action cinema from the other side of the world. He fights without CGI, without doubles, without Hollywood's approval, and in doing so, he's achieved something far rarer than fame. He's earned respect. 2. Gordon Liu. Before Hollywood discovered Kung Fu, Gordon Liu was already its living embodiment, the silent storm behind the golden age of martial arts cinema. Born in Hong Kong, trained in traditional Hung Gar discipline, Gordon became a household name through his collaborations with the legendary Shaw Brothers studio. His role as the bald-headed monk San Ti in the 36th Chamber of Shaolin turned him into a symbol of wisdom, resilience, and spiritual might. For decades, he was the warrior philosopher of Asian cinema, revered across the East. But when Hollywood finally came calling, it didn't come with respect. It came with tokenism. In the early 2000s, Quentin Tarantino, a lifelong fan of classic kung fu films, cast Gordon Liu in Kill Bill. It should have been a triumphant crossover, a long overdue acknowledgement of his influence on generations of action filmmakers. But what the West saw as a tribute, many in the East recognized as an exploitation. Gordon played two roles, the villainous Pai Mei, a cruel caricature of a kung fu master, and a nameless assassin. His craft was real, his presence undeniable, but his dialogue was written in stereotypes, cold, cryptic, otherworldly. Hollywood had turned one of the greats into a novelty act. After Kill Bill, Gordon expected new opportunities. None came. He was offered no major roles, no franchise deals, no invitations to the Hollywood circles he'd inspired. While the industry celebrated his likeness in video games and homages, the man himself faded into obscurity. Behind closed doors, he expressed disappointment that Western producers only saw him as a character, never an actor. Even Tarantino, who claimed to idolize him, never cast him again. Then tragedy struck. Gordon suffered a severe brain injury after a stroke, leaving half his body paralyzed. Hollywood offered condolences, but not compassion. The same studios that borrowed his image for decades never offered support or tribute. In Hong Kong, he was cared for quietly by friends and disciples, living modestly while his legend grew online. Gordon Liu's ban wasn't formal, it was cultural erasure. He was too old, too foreign, too authentic for an industry that feeds on imitation. Hollywood wanted his style but not his soul. Today, his influence echoes in every kung fu scene shot in the West, from The Matrix to John Wick. And though the studios never gave him his due, history will. Gordon Liu taught the world that martial arts isn't about fame or violence, it's about mastery of the spirit. Hollywood might have forgotten his name, but every true fighter remembers his legacy. 1. Sammo Hung. Sammo Hung is the godfather of modern martial arts cinema, the man who built the stage for Jackie Chan, Donnie Yen, and countless others to rise. Unlike most kung fu stars, he didn't fit Hollywood's mold. He wasn't lean, sculpted, or conventionally handsome. He was big, broad, and moved, like a dancer possessed by thunder. In Hong Kong, that contrast made him iconic proof that mastery isn't measured in muscle, but in control, creativity, and soul. Yet when he finally crossed into Hollywood, the industry didn't see a legend. It saw a punchline. Sammo's influence is everywhere. He choreographed some of the most iconic action sequences in history, shaping the style that Western directors would later copy and claim as innovation. His films like Eastern Condors, Pedicab Driver, and The Prodigal Son are now studied by stunt teams around the world. When he teamed up with Jackie Chan in Project A and Dragons Forever, audiences saw two artists redefining what martial arts could be: storytelling through motion, comedy through impact, art through pain. By the time Hollywood came knocking, Sammo had already accomplished what most actors could only dream of. He had changed cinema itself. But in Hollywood, none of that mattered. When CBS launched the TV series Martial Law in the late 90s, it seemed like Sammo's long-overdue breakthrough. He played a Chinese detective in Los Angeles, using wit and kung fu to solve crimes, essentially. An Asian action hero in prime time. The show was a hit with viewers, but behind the scenes, tensions ran deep. Writers reportedly struggled to understand Sammo's humor or culture, cutting his dialogue and reshaping him into an awkward foreigner. Crew members complained about his English, while Sammo himself grew frustrated with the lack of creative respect. After 2 seasons, the network quietly canceled the series. Hollywood's door closed as quickly as it had opened. Offers that followed were shallow villains, comic reliefs, or sidekicks. Sammo refused them all. He returned to Asia, where he continued directing, choreographing, and mentoring younger fighters. Meanwhile, Hollywood filled its screens with pale imitations of the style he'd invented. Sammo Hung's exile was never about scandal. It was about bias. The industry didn't know how to frame a hero who didn't look like one, and it couldn't accept that the best action director alive didn't come from Los Angeles. He was banned not by decree, but by design. Today, Sammo remains revered as Dago, the big brother of martial arts cinema. His work trained the eyes, bodies, and spirits of generations. Hollywood may have forgotten his name, but every stunt that lands and every kick that connects owes him a silent bow. Sammo Hung was never just a kung fu star, he was the soul of the art itself, and no ban could erase that. Hollywood built its empire on borrowed glory, and few stories prove that better than these 15 warriors. From Bruce Lee's defiance to Sammo Hung's unshakable pride, every name on this list carries the same wound. They gave everything to the craft, only to be told they didn't belong in the house they helped build. Some were too real, too foreign, too outspoken. Others were simply too good to be controlled. And that's the one sin Hollywood never forgives independence. What unites them isn't exile, but endurance. When the studios shut their doors, they turned eastward, building new empires in Hong Kong, Bangkok, Beijing, and Jakarta. They trained generations, redefined cinema, and proved that true artistry doesn't need American approval to be eternal. Hollywood may write the headlines, but these fighters wrote history. Every punch they threw, every fall they took, every bruise they carried, it wasn't just choreography, it was rebellion. And while Hollywood's red carpets fade, their legacy endures louder, stronger, and freer than ever. Because legends don't need permission, they just keep fighting.